guys.
That's an intro, man. Okay, I'm gonna
keep going like this. You're the.
We're gonna rehearse offline. I have some kick-ass jams that we can work from.
Okay.
Don't worry about it. I got you.
Oh, jeez. All right.
Cowbell is a unique instrument that it gets annoying after about 12 seconds. So you can only go.
Yep.
I don't think Will Ferrell will agree. It's the best instrument. It adds flavor, sabor, Without it, music is nothing.
Correct.
All right. So who wants to introduce the topic, introduce the second episode?
Apparently
it's not my show. It's not my show.
Welcome to the second episode.
Yeah, second episode 2. So one of the things we were talking about for today was opportunities, or kind of what's the startup scene in and around the whole IoT and industrial IoT. I'm sure we're going to get a kind of interesting diversity of opinions here, but that's the topic for today. I've kind of, I've been there, had some good ones, had some not so good ones. I think anybody that's lived through that, it's nobody bats 1,000. But I get asked a lot from people that are both the investment side and people that are contemplating doing a startup. Where's the sweet spot? And I think the one common thread I get in a lot of these discussions is there's particularly like the investor side really doesn't know our space, right? They're learning as they go along. It's just an alien thing to them. Secondly, on the startup side, things are temporal, right? Opportunities have a shelf life. So what was a great place to invest and start a company about 3 years ago, it's radically different now. And that's the kind of thing, I think everything's so backwards looking that maybe one of the topics for today was using the brain power on this call to look forward. Like, what are the opportunities moving ahead? Does anybody want to take a stab at that?
Hey, Rick, one quick question. Sorry. So are you interested on IoT startups where you are not target?
No, what's that again?
So are you interested on IoT startups where you are not the target or the?
Oh yeah, of course, absolutely.
Yeah, Rob, you should share your story about Moab before Moab Foundation and what you were doing before you joined Ericsson, right? You had some interesting situations that you encountered.
I was having fun.
Yeah.
Rick knows about this too. After the end of Hitachi, doing the Lumada thing, but before I joined Ericsson, I spent about 4 months at a co-working place in downtown Seattle, like literally across the street from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And, I guess I was inspired to keep building something. It was kind of more edge focused actually, but really digital twin focused. A lot of the stuff I've been working on and pushing with Lumada and Hitachi and kind of the vision for the future was primarily around digital twins and using them in the manufacturing setting. Because, as you can imagine, Hitachi's an industrial conglomerate. And so that was kind of the focus. I just wanted to keep pushing. And since I still write code, maybe not as well as I used to, but I could grind through it. And actually it was good to get back into it. I could tell how bad I was, and then I could see myself improving over time.
It feels good though, doesn't it?
It felt great. It did. I could tell I was an idiot for a while, and then I was like, okay, I'm getting better. I'm copying and pasting less to do OO programming, and so, I had a vision for the future for where I thought digital twins should go. And when Hitachi ended, I had so many people were like, oh, you're just going to go back to Microsoft. You're going to go to AWS. You're going to go, and my biggest worry was that I would disappear inside some big company after playing a prominent role at a giant company like Hitachi. And so I didn't want that to happen. And so that was kind of the driving force. It's like, I just wanted to see where I could go with it. Had some money, some runway, had the support of my wife, or none of this would have happened, as opposed to the go get a job kind of
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I spent time doing it. And you're right, Leonard, you and I hung out a bunch, and, you know, we went to Barcelona, and we were, but yeah, that was this enterprise IoT thing. It was kind of running at the edge. I was trying to do this low memory footprint, really efficient, you know, but all about twins in this company called Enterprise IoT. Anyway, long story short, as you know, I kind of got into the MVP stage, I would say. But all along, folks at Ericsson had been recruiting me. And so in the background, I've been going through an interview process. So I ultimately joined Ericsson, and then all this code just kind of was sitting on my laptop, or, you know, up in the cloud somewhere. And
still waiting, by the way, for you to get it in GitHub.
It is in GitHub. It is. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. And that's always a weird thing too. When you're doing something on your own and you put it in GitHub, there's that moment of embarrassment, or am I going to be ashamed when people see my code? But I'll tell you, to your point, Leonard, you know, I dove in Ericsson, and, you know, and heads down there. And then I remember just going to different events, you know, lots of them in Barcelona and other places. And I had people coming up to me saying, hey, what'd you do with all that code? Or whatever happened to that thing you were building? And this kept happening over and over and over again. And I was like, well, nothing. It's just kind of sitting on my laptop. And I had people saying, could I have your code? Could I pull it into my pseudo Y Combinator thing and shepherd it through to life? I had a lot of that happening, and I was really surprised. And so on weekends, eventually I kind of went back to it and started tinkering. And then I started building on that. And I often talk about, you know, people like do the New York Times crossword puzzle on the weekends. For me, it was just working on this code. And the whole Moab deal, I was calling the product, this platform, Moab, just because I liked hiking there in Moab, Utah, and seeing those, all the beautiful stuff, which I know, Stephanie, you got to go there recently, which is pretty cool. You got some great pictures. At the same time, I was pulled into more and more events around IoT, but we're talking about sustainability and talking about climate change, talking about water issues. And over time, in my mind, I was like, gosh, you know, aside from all this business stuff we're always talking about with IoT, I can really see how a lot of these use cases in all these other sustainability issues could be really helped a lot by IoT ideas, concepts. And so I really started focusing on that, and found myself having to speak at different conferences and on panels where I actually had to have my act together. And so I was researching and everything, and I would come up with a list of all these use cases where I could tackle water issues or whatever with IoT. And then it kind of took me on a journey, and it took on a life of its own. And then I was really interested in the, you know, the United Nations 17 Sustainable Development Goals. If for no other reason, not that they're great, but it's also just organizing in your mind. It gives me 17 categories of broad topics, and then I can go through those and start tackling use cases. Because I know a lot of us probably say the same thing, and people probably roll their eyes, but the technology is the easy part. Figuring out the use cases for the specific problem and laying out the steps to solve that problem, that's the hard part. And so I found myself spending more and more of my time doing that. And then it just kind of popped in my head. It's like, you know what, this Moab code I keep working on, I'm just going to give it away. And I want it focused on this. And so I started this foundation. I didn't want to just give another open source IoT platform away. And it's more narrowly focused. But it was just, you know, two goals of the foundation. Let's power through the 17 sustainable development goals. Maybe not all of them will work, but work on building out the use cases. That's step one. And then step two, here's this free platform that is low memory footprint that someone in a village in Africa or India or wherever could run this on a little tiny computer and get telemetry and really move the needle and solve problems in places. And so that's kind of where I'm at.
Hey, Rob, in that context, was your target for this kind of the citizen developer, hacker at that point, empowering them to get things done? Did you start out with the goal of going after kind of a enterprise customer commercial product, and then it kind of morphed?
Yes, it was enterprise first. Absolutely. It was enterprise. It was kind of that big business world that so many of us have lived in. And then you're right. It totally morphed. And I keep trying, and I keep working. I don't want to have developers having to write a lot of code to make stuff work, because I know that's a non-starter for a lot of people. And I know it's easier said than done too. So anyway, it's funny. I've been writing a lot about digital twins lately, a whole lot of different aspects of it. But what's funny about it is, which has been really helpful for me, is when I come up with a concept, here's the thing. People are just making stuff up right now, as you probably know. There's no standards. There's no standards body, even though I've been a part of a steering group to put together yet another consortium around digital twins that's going to be an offshoot out of the Industrial Internet Consortium. But there's no standards. And so I know how this works. And so I just kind of put stuff out there. This is how I think they should work. Here are the different aspects of twins and models. And I've been writing a lot of articles about it. But what's going on behind the scenes is I'm not just talking about it. Behind the scenes, I am working on my code to make sure that my platform actually does the stuff, the crazy crap that I'm writing about. This thing actually does it. And so it's been kind of fun, because sometimes I feel guilty about saying something that might come off as total BS if you can't make it real. And so behind the scenes on the weekend, I'm like, coding away. It's like, okay, yeah, this really works. And I did something really crazy over the weekend where I just wrote this whole big thing about digital twins as employees at companies.
Yeah, that was a cool article.
Totally out of the realm of IoT, but it just I wrote an article a year ago about a different view of digital transformation in big companies, where I was kind of thinking, well, what if digital twins were like the people or processes and APIs, connected interactions between peoples and departments and stuff like that. And some people thought it was cool. Some people thought I was crazy, which is pretty normal for me. So I decided I was going to take that concept and go deep based on the digital twin articles. I was going to bring them all to life to see what could happen. So I'm weird that way.
You can make a valid argument that, people have an API, right? They perform functions, and we don't want to dehumanize, of course, right?
Yeah.
Everybody does it differently, but as a cog in the wheel of some kind of entity, there is a certain ThingWorx days, person had, properties and events and tags and so there's a twin of that. The other one that I know you're doing a lot of work in this space, that I find not a lot of people are taking a spin on the digital twin of processes. It's so asset focused now, and that seems like another kind of interesting place to innovate.
Yeah. But I think that's sort of an old school area, right? It's like business process modeling and management. So that's actually an area where back in the day where when web services first came out and everyone's starting to look at service-oriented architectures, people were thinking about that. And, we already have platforms for that. And so what I think is going to happen is sort of this marriage.
That's the problem,
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't know the history of what has been. And so we're always reinventing stuff, like, MuleSoft. Everyone thought, oh, wow, MuleSoft, this thing is so innovative. And it's like there's been middleware and business process management modeling tools for ages. We've been doing this for over 2 decades, actually. So, but obviously, technology is always progressing, moving forward. But one of the things that Rob, and this kind of goes off of what you mentioned, Rick, earlier, was this whole one of the things, Rob, in the stories that you told me about your adventure with Enterprise IO, is that when you were talking to the VCs, you started explaining what a digital twin was, and then the VC went, "What's a digital twin?" Right? And so, to your point, Rick, it seems like the folks who are not in the technical realm, working with the technology on a daily basis, applying it, they're trying to catch up, right? And we're moving so much faster than their ability to actually understand not only the technology, how it can be applied in the world and driving value, right? I think that's the biggest gap, and probably one of the reasons why there's the VCs are not getting any better at making their bets, right?
Yeah.
And I know that that's the case in Silicon Valley. It's been like that forever, ever since I was working in the Bay Area during the dot-com era. But I just wanted to see if we can pass the ball to Mark. He's very interested in this topic. I know we want to talk about this. But what are you guys seeing in the startup community in Barcelona or in Spain, because that community is really vibrant? And then maybe that we can go to Stephanie, who we have on the call. We want to give her a little bit of space to introduce herself, but also share some of her thoughts on IoT startup. So hey, Mark, you want to share some of your thoughts on the VC dynamic in Europe?
Sure. Yeah. That's a very good question, actually. In Spain, there are kind of a lot of IoT companies, actually. Some succeeding on some specific use cases, but yeah, what I wanted to explain as well, it's my experience, with the Things.io, helping companies to digitalize products and launching them into the market. It was funny because we were seeing a lot of companies who were doing like Rob was doing. So yeah, technology is fun, technology is easy to do, but they didn't take into account how to launch this product into the market.
Yeah.
So this is how we help them with I don't know if someone else called it like this, but we created kind of a framework with help of a friend, called it prototyping. That is before the prototyping. So the prototyping, it's okay, just make a website, make a store on your website, and hire a designer for $1,000 that can make like a really cool device design, just the render, put it there and see if you can sell it. If your value proposition is right and people want to sell it, just pay some hundreds of dollars on Facebook ads or LinkedIn ads or whatever, and see if this makes sense, if anyone wants to buy this IoT device. If there is someone, or there are like a bunch of people who wants to buy these IoT devices, okay, let's go to technology and let's talk about processors, technologies, protocols, etc. No, and this is how we have been helping a lot of companies on taking care first of, if the value proposition is right, which use case they should focus first, and then from there going to the technology side. And I think that we should, we love technology. We are techno optimists all here, but we should help on sales and marketing, and that are the hardest part on this tale. So what do you think?
Well, I mean, I think the go-to-market is definitely a challenge, right? And you really need to figure out. Oh, am I still on mute? Am I having a technical difficulty?
We can hear you.
Live? Okay. Yeah, and so I think that's the gap that needs to be closed. And I think everyone's out there trying to sell blueprints for how this works. That's a big
problem with investability, though. To be honest with you, is one of the things that a lot of investors are going to look at is that team's ability to bring it to market, right? So helping, coaching. Or maybe even there's a new business model we haven't seen yet, where there's ways to aggregate that go-to-market. Let smart people do what they do well. But it does make it a difficult thing to get to raise money for.
Yeah.
Mark, I would love to hear more of just the backstory. I mean, you're the one person who's been living the IoT startup life for several years. How did you get started? And what's the journey been like?
I get started, like 15 years ago on the university. I'm a computer engineer. So I started programming wheelchairs that were moving autonomously in hospitals. Like all these videos that I have seen on LinkedIn last year of robots moving around hotels, delivering stuff. This is what I was doing 15 years ago. I was actually doing an algorithm to prevent collisions among these robots. I would love to see two robots, one in front of the other, but what happens, and even collisions with humans. No, so actually from there I jumped into web development, but then I jumped into research and development, doing starting to do a lot of IoT and smart cities projects, and starting from scratch every time all these cloud solutions from all the customers. Then there was this Pachubi time, no, and I decided to launch something to help companies to don't start from scratch every time.
So how did you test the whole human collision thing? Did you have like volunteers to be test dummies?
Actually, in 2005, there was no actually, the technology was very different. Huh? So no mobile phones, PDAs, etc. So yeah, I don't know if we tested properly, but it was a European project actually.
Fewer personal injury lawyers too. That's
So hey, Stephanie, really quick, let's give our friend Stephanie some time on the mic here. Hey, are you there?
I'm here.
Stephanie, you're one of our stakeholders on the show. So why don't you introduce yourself really quickly, since you're new, and and share your thoughts.
Oh, thanks for having me. Stephanie Atkinson. I've been running Compass Intelligence for about 15 years. So background in market research, very strong background in B2B. So understanding use cases, outcomes. An outcomes approach is something we've been talking a lot about lately. And exploring that for our customers. We primarily serve technology companies, IoT companies, mobile companies, do a lot of work with the wireless carriers, and helping them kind of filter through all the noise and really help them with their go-to-market messaging and help them really put themselves in the shoes of a business, because a lot of times we are so heavily focused on technology, and we are not really focusing on what it means to the customer. So the customer experience as well, the whole entire journey from purchase stage all the way to customer services stage. So that's something that we focus on. I also recently started a new business called VMark, and it all came about because of the pandemic and noticing so many small businesses that weren't really prepared virtually to handle their operations, to serve customers, to dynamically change their website so they can do ordering, scheduling, appointments, all of that online. So we just started that, and it's really new and up and coming. So that's also keeping me busy and getting involved with different advisory boards. And you mentioned the gap, and so I wanted to kind of bring it back to one of the things that I'm doing with Texas A&M's and University's engineering department is I think a lot of our gap is really around the fact that when we go and look back at our universities and how we're training and educating the kids that are coming into the market, that we in the past have kept technology very, very separate from go-to-market. And so we're really starting to see the universities get that gap. And so they're really redesigning their curriculums to really embrace and pull in a lot more soft skill types classes and business services classes. And, it's not just the traditional marketing and accounting, which we all have taken those classes, right? But it's really more of really basic things, which a lot of times your engineers, your computer design folks, your data scientists, they don't have those soft skills. So I think that's one way we can bridge that gap. So when the VCs are talking to the technologists that are, trying to sell their wares, that they actually have some soft skills and they can speak to it intelligently about what it means to the market. So it does start from that early side, and I think that we're really starting to see that now. And a very big investment in the universities around data scientists. A lot of realization that we have great engineers out there, we have great technologists out there, but we really need folks that understand business operations. So the operation of the OT side, right? And so I think that's really where we're starting to see a lot of changes on the university side, and as well as the VCs that are out there. the M&A companies that are out there, all of these guys are really starting to see that they need to have those, they need to really understand the business market much more clearly than they have in the past. So we can't just lead with technology. I mean, I think it's great, like with Rob and Mark, all of you guys that are really hands-on and are coding and you have your hands-on approach with technology. But I think even more importantly is leading from start with what's out there in the market that's missing. What do customers need? And then building after that. And I think that's a really different approach to design, development, startups, whatnot. But and it may be more the case in retail and some other industries, but for IoT, I think a lot of folks, and the reason why we've been getting it so wrong is that we've been leading with the technology.
Yeah, totally agree. And the work that I've done with some startups, what I've noticed is that a lot of the executive team, they don't really get a good feel for the market opportunity. And albeit it's quite fuzzy to begin with, but they come to you with the wrong numbers, right? So they're seeing these really inflated numbers from particular, you know who's, yeah. And they end up really being, I don't know. I think the only way you can really characterize it is wrong. And so oftentimes you have these folks come in and they'll talk about their business case, and you look at the numbers and the foundations for how they came up with their financials and their forecasts, and you realize that they don't understand the numbers and they don't understand the data, which I think is really important. And so, in order to make an informed decision on how much they're going to actually invest their lives, their time, and their energy into a startup, it behooves them to really do that first step really well, which is qualify the market opportunity. And I think it's challenging. It's not easy, right?
It's also super rare that one person has all those skills. And I think that a common mistake is not building that team, right? Bringing those skills on at the right time, because that's a completely different discipline, right? Your marketing messaging, your business development and cutting contracts and selling to end customers. Evangelical selling is different than kind of, enterprise. And that's why I'm wondering if there's ways to kind of, at least in the early stages of companies, share those skills across a bunch of companies, because you might not be at the point where you can afford a full-time BD person or a full-time whatever. But, to Stephanie's point, those soft skills are actually what make or break the company. There's no shortage of smart people, right? And, even if we look at our space, right, we kind of think IoT is a thing. It's just a feature, right? It's a capability that people are using to solve some bigger business problem. Mm-hmm. AR, insert any acronym of the day, right? It's just one of the building blocks. And I'd love to see the universities, and Stephanie, get your take on this, kind of return to the old, and some universities do this, kind of as a matter of fact, internships and co-ops as part of the educational process, because it just makes such a difference when they come out of school with not just book smart, right, but the basics of just knowing how businesses operate, a richer, maybe some vertical domain skills. It's more like the applied skills as opposed to the, just the technology side of it. But I think those co-ops and internships would be a great way to help build some of those soft skills you're talking about.
Right. I think that a lot of what you've seen in the past is your master's programs were definitely more hands-on and applied. They're really moving that more into the bachelor programs as well. I know at Texas A&M University with the engineering school, engineering technology and industrial distribution specifically, they have capstone projects, which a lot of schools are doing. And they partner with, Dell and HP, these big companies come in, and even some mid-sized companies, and they're partnering with them, and they're doing a lot more hands-on projects. And they're really facilitating new programs in the universities to set up internships and paid and completely non-paid internships And I think those have so much more meaning for students that are really trying to get their arms around the business side, because the schools are doing really well with the technology classes and all of that. But that some things are really learned hands-on, and you can take classes all day, but until you've experienced a startup and have set up your federal your employment identification number and your incorporation stuff and working through all that paperwork, you don't really know what that is. And that's such a foundation that you have to have, and skills that it's not really taught anywhere. So we're seeing a lot more of that. And with the capstone projects, I think all the universities have been challenged, of course, recently and this year. They've learned to embrace virtual and Zoom and other technologies to facilitate a lot of their lab and projects and things that they have that are hands-on. But that's definitely more, we're seeing much more of that. I don't know if anybody else has seen that or experienced that with some of the other universities, but I would also say that for entrepreneurs that are really getting their hands, it's important to look back at your local community, your universities that are within your city, and because there's a lot of free programs and resources that are out there, but it's just hard because you don't know about them. So I would say do your homework, do your research, because there are a lot of free sources and folks that are volunteering, and the SBA even has offices within each city that have volunteers that offer business development, marketing, branding, all of that for free. And so I say look and do your research, because there's probably some programs out there that you could leverage for free because we all know when we have a startup, we just don't have the funds generally, or we're looking for funding. So I think that we've got to do our homework and find those resources that are out there, because they are out there. They're just not very well known or talked about.
I've even found like the incubator, everyone kind of, there was a trend where the incubators were the thing, right? You wanted to get into the boutique or name marquee incubator. And I kind of found that was like, the term I used was they need grad school, right? If you think of that as like your undergrad, all the companies felt like they were ready to fly coming out of the incubator. And it's almost like you needed that second wave about the real world business, learning to be rejected. Because if you want to do a startup, that's a real important learning to deal with no and things like that.
Get some pretty thick skin.
Yeah. But anyway, that kind of, I don't know what it is beyond all the even basic entrepreneurial classes. To your point, it's out in the real world where you're going to really develop those skills.
But at the end, I as a startup founder, I try to avoid all of these startup rodeo marketplace shit where people was created the business model on the top of the startups, no? And I try to stop going to startup events, incubators, etc., because it was a kind of waste of time, and companies trying to sell things to startups. I don't say that what you're doing, Stephanie, it's that.
No. I understand. I think that too. What happened was there were a lot of independent incubators that were kind of sitting around, and I don't know if some of them weren't properly managed, and they've gone and they've come and gone. But the ones that I see that are still thriving are the ones at the universities. A lot of the universities have developed their own incubators and have their own startup kind of organizations set aside. And they will witness a student go through their program and all of a sudden come up with a concept idea and start to put the pieces together, and then they'll vet them, and then they'll put them in their incubator. And the engineer, they have full access to the research department, to the lab service, to the 3D printers, to all of these things. I'm like, that's a win-win. You go back to some of these other incubators, and all they had was like super, great fiber and internet. But other than that, they didn't really have a lot of the resources that some of these folks need. So
for me,
the
good ones I saw were corporate-led incubators. So, you pick a pharmaceutical company, you pick an industrial company that had a very specific set of problems they thought they had. And they're like, you know what? We don't have the money to stand this up. We cannot go on a hiring spree. We don't know what we don't know. Let's get an incubator. Say, if we say, hey, we're pharma and this is what we do. This is going to call out the folks that have ideas on how to digitize this, how to prevent fraud, how to look at things that these folks are not looking. And now to your point, Stephanie, they've got money, they've got access to the real facilities if they need to. So I've seen, have been involved with some of those on the background. Those have been successful. And I think the link is you've got people with fresh eyes looking at old problems, but being given resources in terms of, again, time, money, access, and lastly, domain expertise. Because Kiddo can go to Joe, who's been walking this factory for 20 years, and he still tunes things by going like this. Yeah, that's okay. And I've seen that. So anyway, I've seen success on those incubators, accelerators, and then nightmares from others where, to Mark's point, they were there just to, their business model was to get startups come and pay them for exposure. Nightmares.
And they were more like shared workspaces. They weren't really incubators.
My suggestion would be to go to incubators or similar things with successful entrepreneurs managing these incubators or these spaces. Like in Spain, we have an incubator called Seed Rocket, but it's just successful entrepreneurs that sold multiple companies. And this is at least the place that it makes sense to go.
I don't know if you've seen the studio model. It's not that widely adopted, but the studio model is kind of a hybrid of that, where some of those people that came out of operating executives or staff out of successful startups bring, co-innovate with these companies that are sort of an incubator, but it also gives the option for those operating executives to go join one of those companies and help them grow.
Yeah.
As opposed to, you're on your own. Good luck.
So David, I'm glad that you managed to chime in toward the end there. I thought you disappeared on us, buddy. But next time you do this, you borrow Rick's cowbell. Okay?
Well, Leonard, I told you that I will be the lowest common denominator.
No.
I look. I mean, I've got a drum. I don't even know how to play this thing, but it reminds me of my warm Dominican Republic.
Well, I'll tell you what. For the next show, you and Rick need to rehearse. Okay, you got. I don't think he has rhythm. I have a funny feeling he's going to be like totally off time. So you need to coach him. You gotta.
I have a coach I can call.